Arthur Finch was a creature of habit. He worked from home as a graphic designer, kept his lawn meticulously trimmed, and his interactions with neighbors were cordial but brief. A quick wave, a passing hello. His solitude was a conscious choice, a peaceful existence in the seemingly idyllic suburb of Oakwood Heights, Ohio. It was a life he cherished, until a seemingly innocuous technical glitch shattered his carefully constructed quiet. The trouble started on a Tuesday afternoon. Arthur's internet, a lifeline for his work, had been sluggish for days. Video calls would freeze, music streams would buffer, and simple web pages took an eternity to load. Suspecting a problem with his service provider, he logged into his router's admin portal. What he found made him pause. Scrolling through the list of connected devices, he spotted an anomaly. A device labeled Oakwood_I01 was active on his network. Arthur lived alone. He knew every gadget he owned, his laptop, his smart TV, his phone. None of them carried that name. He was also meticulous about his digital security, never sharing his Wi-Fi password. A cold knot of unease formed in his stomach. Someone was not just stealing his internet. They had intentionally named their device, a brazen act that felt more like a provocation than a simple theft. Annoyed and feeling a violation of his personal space, Arthur decided to boot the rogue device and change his password. He grabbed his phone and stepped outside for better reception, leaning against the side of his house as he furiously typed in a new, complex passphrase. And that's when Lorraine Hayes, his next-door neighbor, saw him from her kitchen window. Lorraine had always eyed Arthur with suspicion. He didn't participate in neighborhood potlucks, never stopped for a chat, and kept to himself. To her, his reserved nature was a red flag, a sign of something to hide. Now, watching him stand in his driveway, his face illuminated by his phone screen, his fingers moving with frantic intensity, her mind raced. He looked furtive, clandestine. She didn't have any evidence, just a feeling, a deep-seated certainty that Arthur Finch was up to no good. Without a second thought, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report something suspicious," she said, her voice tight with conviction. "My neighbor, Arthur Finch. He's outside, doing something on his phone. It just looks wrong. He's always so secretive. I think you should send someone to check it out." The dispatcher pressed for more details, but Lorraine had none. She just repeated her unfounded claim. "He's plotting something. I can feel it." Unaware of the storm brewing just yards away, Arthur finished updating his password and sighed in relief. The sirens he heard moments later seemed distant, an irrelevant backdrop to his own quiet afternoon. That was until a patrol car pulled to a stop in front of his house. Two officers stepped out. Detective Julian Reese, a broad-shouldered man with a watchful gaze, and Officer Eva Sanchez, whose calm demeanor belied a sharp intelligence. "Sir, we receive a report of suspicious activity," Reese called out, his voice a low, steady rumble. "A neighbor reported you were doing something with your phone that seemed out of place. Can you tell us what you were doing?" Arthur's face clouded with confusion. "I was changing my Wi-Fi password," he said, holding up his phone. He couldn't believe it. He was being questioned for standing in his own driveway. Suspicious activity? "I've lived here for 5 years. Before Reese could respond, Lorraine's voice cut through the air. "He's lying." She stood on her porch, a triumphant look on her face. "He's always out there, fiddling with his phone. He's watching everyone. He's been out there for a good 10 minutes, just tapping away." Arthur's frustration boiled over. "I was in my router settings," he stated, his voice now flat with disbelief. "Someone I don't know has been using my internet." Lorraine scoffed. "Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that." Detective Reese turned to her, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Ma'am, do you have any tangible proof that Mr. Finch has done anything illegal?" When she couldn't answer, he turned back to Arthur. "Sir, would you mind showing us your router settings? Just to put this to rest." Despite the injustice of it all, Arthur knew it was better to comply. He unlocked his phone and handed it to Reese. "Fine," he muttered. "Take a look." Reese's expression shifted as he scanned the device list. There was Oakwood_I01. "Who owns this device?" Reese asked, his tone now professional and alert. Not me, Arthur replied. I have no idea who it belongs to. Officer Sanchez stepped in. So someone has been accessing your network without permission? Worse than that, Arthur said, his mind putting the pieces together. They're not just stealing my bandwidth. The connection log show has been active nonstop. I think they've been watching. Reese's posture stiffened. The air of a petty neighborhood squabble vanished, replaced by the heavy silence of a serious investigation. Lorraine, still on her porch, looked suddenly small and uncertain. Wait, she whispered. What do you mean, watching? I mean, Arthur said, turning to her, his eyes cold and unwavering. Someone has been spying on us, and they might be watching all of us. The gravity of his words hung in the air. Lorraine, who had been so certain of her righteousness, suddenly felt a jolt of fear. This wasn't what she'd expected. All right, Reese said, his voice now a crisp command. Let's get inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. Arthur led the officers into his house. Lorraine, feeling a strange mix of dread and morbid curiosity, followed them inside. Arthur connected his phone to his laptop, mirroring the router settings onto the larger screen. The Oakwood_I01 device was still there, a digital phantom in their midst. Sanchez leaned closer. Can you tell what kind of device this is? I can't get a specific model, Arthur said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He clicked on the activity logs, and his movements froze. A wave of ice-cold realization washed over him. Reese noticed a change in his face. What is it? It's been accessing camera feeds, Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper. He turned the laptop around. My home security cameras. Someone's been logging in and watching my live feeds. Sanchez's expression tightened. You're saying someone has been spying on you through your own security system? Yes, Arthur said sharply, but his stomach dropped as he scrolled further. It wasn't just his cameras. The system had flagged multiple IP addresses, some within his network, but others from different homes in the neighborhood. This is bad, he murmured. Reese leaned in. What do you mean? Arthur tapped the screen. Whoever this is, they aren't just watching me. They're watching other people in the neighborhood, too. Lorraine took a step back, shaking her head. No, that can't be right. You sure about that? Arthur asked, pointing to another log. A new feed appeared on the screen, a dimly lit hallway, then a living room, then a bedroom. Lorraine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's... She stammered. Your house. Arthur finished for her. Lorraine sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Oh my God. Reese's jaw tightened. We need to figure out who's behind this, and fast. He pulled out his radio, calling for a cybercrime unit. This is bigger than we thought. Arthur, still at his laptop, was already digging deeper. He wasn't a professional hacker, but he understood enough about network protocols to trace the data's destination. He opened the IP logs and froze. Wait, this can't be right. What is it? Reese asked. Arthur turned the laptop again. The data isn't being sent to a random server. It's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood. Lorraine's eyes widened. You mean someone close by is behind this? Arthur nodded, working frantically. He cross-referenced connection timestamps with signal strength data. Within minutes, he had a match. The address that appeared on the screen made his blood run cold. He knew that house. Lorraine knew it too. No, she whispered, her head shaking in denial. That's Brandon's house, Arthur finished, his voice hard. Brandon Foster, Lorraine's own nephew, a quiet, 22-year-old college student who had been living with her for a few months. He was always in his room, always on his computer, rarely socialized. It all clicked into place with a horrifying clarity that Lorraine's face went white. No, that doesn't make any sense. Brandon isn't, he wouldn't. Sanchez's eyes were fixed on Lorraine. We need to talk to him now. Lorraine hesitated, but the truth was undeniable. I'll take you to him, she murmured, her voice hollow. Arthur stood up. I'm coming too. Reese gave him a sharp look. No, you stay here. We'll handle this. Arthur reluctantly agreed, his jaw clenched, as the two officers followed a trembling Lorraine down the street to her house. The walk felt like a slow-motion nightmare for Lorraine. Brandon, her nephew, the boy she had taken in, the one she fed and helped with his studies. She couldn't believe it was him. And yet, the cold dread in her stomach told her it was true. She opened the front door and called his name, but there was no answer. Reese and Sanchez exchanged a look and headed for the stairs. They found Brandon's bedroom door shut. "Brandon, this is the police," Reese said, knocking hard. "We need to talk to you." A moment of silence, then the scrape of a chair and footsteps. The door slowly creaked open. Brandon Foster stood there, his eyes wide with a panicked, cornered look. His hands were clasped behind his back, twitching nervously. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice strained. "We have reason to believe you've been accessing private security cameras in the neighborhood," Reese said, his gaze unwavering. "Care to explain that?" Brandon's face barely flinched, but his grip tightened on whatever he was holding. "That's crazy," he scoffed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sanchez wasn't buying it. "Mind if we check your laptop?" Brandon's jaw tightened. "You don't have a warrant." Reese stepped closer. "We can get one, Brandon. But right now, we're giving you a chance to tell us the truth before this gets worse." A long, tense pause. Then Brandon exhaled. "Look, I wasn't doing anything illegal, okay? It was I just wanted to see if I could." Reese's voice was sharp. "So you admit you hacked into Network?" Brandon hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. Lorraine's breath caught in her throat. "It started as a joke," Brandon said, his words spilling out. "I wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi, just to mess with them. But then I found the security cameras, and I got curious." Sanchez's eyes narrowed. "Curious or obsessed?" Brandon didn't answer. Reese's patience had run out. "How many people have you watched?" Silence. Then Brandon's voice dropped to a near whisper. "I don't know." Lorraine staggered back, a hand pressed to her mouth. "Oh my God!" "Brandon Foster," Reese said, his voice cold and official. "You're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance." Brandon went pale. "Wait, no, Sanchez was already pulling out her cuffs. As the metal clicked around his wrists, Lorraine turned away, tears welling in her eyes. The truth had been right there all along. And she, in her judgmental blindness, had called the police on the one man who had uncovered the real danger. As Reese led a cuffed Brandon into the patrol car, he paused, turning to Arthur, who was standing on his porch, watching the scene unfold. "You were right," Reese admitted. "If you hadn't caught this, we might have never known." Arthur didn't say anything for a moment. He just let out a slow, weary breath, his gaze shifting from Brandon to Lorraine. "You know what's crazy?" he finally said, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of the day's events. "I was just minding my own business, changing my own Wi-Fi password. And somehow, I was the one who got the cops called on me." Lorraine flinched. She had no defense, no words to offer. I was wrong," she murmured. "I made an assumption. It was completely unfair." Arthur let her words hang in the air for a moment before turning back toward his house. "I don't need an apology," he said over his shoulder. "Just do better." And with that, he went inside, leaving Lorraine standing alone in the street. The truth had been in her own home, hiding in plain sight, but she had been too busy looking at the wrong person. It was a mistake she knew would haunt her for a long, long time. Assumptions have consequences. They are a dangerous shortcut, a leap to conclusions based on fear and bias. When you pass judgment on a person without evidence, you not only risk ruining their life, but you also blind yourself to the real threats that may be lurking just beneath the surface. Instead of making rash judgments, take a step back, observe, and listen. The truth is often far more complex and disturbing than you could ever imagine.